GameStop is trying to break through this longer term resistance stemming from that 34.38, with price getting tight between that 22 and 24.45, finding these ascending profiles, getting crushed back down, lots of back and forth and tightening price action happening, guys. So are we going to see a squeeze effect out of this range, or are sellers going to win this battle, pushing us under that support as well as this ascending support and seeing a continued movement down? All right, guys, starting on the weekly, GameStop is a small cap stock and it's very prone to these huge moves up and huge moves down. Very, very volatile. Come back down here, we get in this descending wedge and we pop out once we get tight and somebody has to win the battle, meaning with this support and this resistance. Pop all the way out to 64, try to get back up there, pop to 48, and we see a bit of tightening price action, but still quite volatile as we kind of trend and find some very nice ascending support. This ascending support holding up quite well throughout the more recent times of GameStop, right? We find that bounce there right around that $18 level, finding that ascending support, and we move up. We tested that 34, trying to break through that and try to find some life for that $48 retest. Cannot get that, so we get in this descending type of channel here, guys, where there's a lot of back and forth, sellers keeping us to the bottom of that range, but sellers do have that ultimate control until we meet right back up with this ascending support, right? We hit here, here, and here, and that's where we get that nice movement out of that range. We get very, very tight compared to this relative price action, and we pop right back to that $35 level, slightly breaking through that 34, but still getting topped right around that range. And then we see a drastic sell-off, given some bad news, which eats price up and pushes us all the way down to $22.49, where we see a bit of tight price action. Very tight given the overall structure and how GameStop likes to move. And take you guys to the daily chart. What we see here in more recent times is we found that ascending support once again, with that support level being quite strong here. And we get that bounce off there, guys, as expected, because this ascending support has led to that nice breakout of that descending pattern. This thing's held up very nicely in general, so we do get that bounce with only 1 day needed to find that bounce. We claim this 22.49 support level, and we find this ascending range looking very nice for the top here, breakthrough of 24 and test of that resistance, but we cannot do that, so let's gain that control. But that support holds up. So we're getting tighter within this range, find another support, kind of bleed out of that, but we do get that test of that longer term resistance. Looks like we're going to break through, but then sellers do step in over the last 4 days, guys, pushing us right back to around that $22 level. Looking like we might get the retest or possibly hold higher in this structure, guys. You know, looking around that 22.90-ish level. Most logical case scenario, though, is we retrace back to that 22.49, finding that bounce and getting tighter within this resistance and that support, trying to look for a squeeze-like effect. So if you guys have been keeping up with the GameStop videos, you guys know that there was some bad news, right? Sales have been declining. GameStop made an investment in Bitcoin. There's a lot of controversy with that. Some people don't think that's the best move. But overall, just lots of bad and controversial news with GameStop. So that's this huge move down and this gap down, continue move down. We do end up finding that support of that ascending support, showing how strong that thing is. But nevertheless, guys, we're talking about around a 27% movement to the downside. That's not even counting the full retracement of this big move up. So lots of room to the upside and a huge gap to fill. So if we potentially got that squeeze-like effect, we would be looking very nice, right? Price kind of tightening up here, doing something like this, finding that support at that 22 once again. Buyers push it up, reject, just get very tight, and then seeing a squeeze-like effect with volume flushing in, guys, as volume has been very much dried up. It likes to flush in and aid these big movements up or down. So if we saw volume flush in, guys, as price really tightens up, building up some energy, as we already are building up some energy, bouncing between those two levels for quite some time, we could definitely be seeing a very volatile movement up, given how volatile this stock is and how much of a gap we have to fill. But watch that resistance as this stemmed that descending range. We got it at 34.38. That's where we found that resistance, and we couldn't break through that resistance, right? We get down, sellers are in ultimate control of the stock, aiding us to the bottom of that range. You don't see a lot of price action above that, so we chop at the bottom of that range. Buyers find some momentum, right? We gap up and push right to the top of that range, but right away get rejected and all the way push back down to the bottom. That's where we meet up with that ascending support, and we find some new ascending support here, get that nice movement up, and we find a very tight range given overall price action. Find some support at 25.81, continue our movement up, and we get in an apex-like range, being a very tight consolidation range, leading to that huge movement up, where we built a lot of energy within this apex, so that gives us a drastic movement up. Then we see a mirroring retracement movement, and we get in another apex-like range, being very similar to this one here, guys. We get in another apex. Before we break down, that's when that bad news flushes in, so we can't get another move up. See that we were kind of pressed against that ascending support there, looking for another movement up. But we kind of bleed out of that with that bad news, and we had that huge drastic gap down. But price was looking quite strong here. After breaking out of a descending range, getting this movement up, we did have that big sell-off, but it looks like we were kind of gearing up for another movement up, that being a higher low formation. But nice to see that ascending support held up, and we are getting very tight within this range. So last 4 days of price action, not good. The sellers are in control, but we do look like we still are tightening up within this range and looking still pretty good to the upside. All right, guys, on the hourly, we see those ascending support levels that we got into, guys. So we got that tap of that long-term ascending support leads us to that range. So we get up to it. Once we hit that resistance zone of 24.45, we reject very quickly, leading us to the bottom of that range. Instead of following that support all the way back up like we did right here, we kind of break off in the middle, bleed out. We don't get a rejection down, but we kind of just chop sideways for a bit before finding that movement, testing that long-term resistance. Cannot get that. We try to move above it twice, kind of double topping and rejecting. So it looks like we are heading back to the floor unless we can hold up here around this general consolidation range. Kind of get tight up here, kind of find that support, and then retest that zone, looking for that squeeze-like effect. Still very much probable. Definitely a solid probability that we do come back down to the floor, testing that 22.49, seeing if that can hold up. If that doesn't hold up, we would very much be headed to that ascending support, that long-term ascending support, where we probably will get the bounce here. But I do think that we stay within this zone, get tighter, and retest that resistance one more time before moving down to this level and this ascending support. So GameStop in a pretty interesting spot here, guys. Lots of chop recently after that big volatile movement down. We have a huge gap to fill. Bad news keeps flushing in. It's not going to help the stock out. So hopefully GameStop can get some better news coming in, guys. It looks like we still are within this range, tightening up. Sellers did find that control around the last week of price action, but we are still within this general range, and we are tightening up with that resistance. So we could be seeing a retest of that resistance, trying to get that squeeze-like effect. And if volume can flush in here, guys, we could be seeing a very volatile squeeze up, as this stock very much likes to make those big movements. Now, let me know your price predictions for GameStop in the comments below. What's your short-term to long-term price predictions? I appreciate you guys watching to the end. If you guys want to see more GameStop content, make sure to like and subscribe. As always, trade smart, and I will see you all in the next one.